Part 20. Bai Xuelan was ambushed and injured on the way to the General Administration of Customs. The car just drove into the alley, and from a distance, I saw a few cars parked at the gate of Nian's house, including cars and jeeps. A group of people stood there, and there were vaguely many soldiers with long guns on their backs. Xuan Huaifeng thought that something big happened in Nian's family. His face changed greatly. He hurriedly got out of the car, and when he came out, he asked, "What happened?" They surrounded Xuan Huaifeng in the middle, as if they were afraid that he would fly away in the blink of an eye. Adjutant Sun turned around from behind him, wiped his sweat and said, "Adjutant Xuan, where have you been? Adjutant Xuan, where have you been? Let's me find hard." Xuan Huaifeng asked with concern, "Why are so many people blocking the door?" "It's my brother-in-law. Is there something wrong there?" Adjutant Sun spoke faster than a machine gun. "Nian's family is all right. We are all sent by the chief. The chief is looking for you. Come back with me." As he said, dragging Xuan Huaifeng turned and got into the car. Xuan Huaifeng breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that Nian's family was safe. But his face sank again in a blink of an eye. He had long felt that Bai Xuelan was too generous today. When you say you want to go home, you are on vacation. Rejected his gift without saying anything. Said he wanted to stay overnight and agreed without asking. It turned out to have such a hand. By the way, Bai Xuelan likes to monitor people indiscriminately and hinder the freedom of others. It is natural to feel uncomfortable when he finds out that he went directly to Nian's house after noon. He has to send someone to interfere and show off his power. Thinking of this, Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help but feel angry. A dignified customs chief, and he didn't do things well, and his mind was devoted to making things difficult for him. He stopped, pressed the car door with one hand and refused to enter, and asked Adjutant Sun, "I'm going out today, and the chief has given me a one-day leave. Why did I call someone back in the middle?" Adjutant Sun didn't answer, but urged him, "Come on. Let's talk about the car. Let's talk about getting in the car." Pushing and shoving him like a fugitive, Adjutant Sun pulled him in by his wrist, and a tall guard behind him pressed his head, supported him on his shoulders, and pulled him into the car. The door slammed shut and the driver stepped on the accelerator. The guards climbed the door of the car, or got on the jeep, and fleeing followed. Xuan Huaifeng was just caught in the car and was very angry. He originally thought that Adjutant Sun was a good person, but now he knew that he was also complicit. And looked at Adjutant Sun in the back seat angrily. "What do you mean? I am here. Have I committed a crime or violated the law? And you want me to be treated like a criminal?" Adjutant Sun frowned and said, "Adjutant Xuan, don't be too busy to get angry. I apologize to you for what happened just now. It really is a matter of last resort. It's a big deal, and the chief has strictly prohibited any rumors. There were too many people at the gate of Nian's house just now, so I can't say it clearly. The chief was ambushed and injured on the way to the General Administration of Customs today." Xuan Huaifeng fiercely the ground froze. After a long while, he let out a breath and lowered his voice. "Are you serious?" Adjutant Sun said anxiously, "Can I still make up this kind of thing to deceive you?" Foreign spear. When an accident happened, the chief remembered that you were outside. For fear that you would also be decorated by those who were not afraid of death and rushed to ask me to bring someone over to protect you. When I arrived at Nian's house, I didn't see you. And I didn't know where you were. We are so anxious that our group is like ants on a hot pot." Xuan Huaifeng stopped him and asked, "Don't talk about me, Bai Xuelan. What's wrong with the chief? Is he seriously injured?" Adjutant Sun said, "I took a look and was urged by him, but I didn't take a closer look. Anyway, when he came back, he was covered in blood." Xuan Huaifeng's heart suddenly tightened, and he quickly asked, Which hospital is the treatment in? Which one? No. The chief said he was not allowed to leak the news. And he refused to go to the hospital. He ordered the guards to take him back to the White Mansion. Because he wanted a Western doctor to come over for treatment. Xuan Huaifeng cursed, confused, in his heart and glanced at Adjutant's son. I think he is too incompetent. A hospital is a hospital after all, and the medical equipment is more complete than the mansion. At such a time, the duty of an adjutant, no matter what Bai Xuelan said. His life was the most important thing, and of course he had to be sent to the hospital. But looking back, I went to a restaurant to eat Western food just now, which is worse than Adjutant's son, so I have no right to complain about others. His hands fell on the seat cushion. Silently clenching his fists. Looking out of the car window, the pedestrians in the shop who were shuffling back and forth were distraught. When we arrived at the White Mansion, there were many more guards standing guard in front of the gate, and everyone was armed with live ammunition. The two adjutants got out of the car and hurried inside, going straight to Bai Xuelan's bedroom. Before I got to the door, I heard Bai Xuelan's voice inside, roaring like it was going to explode. Didn't you say you found it? Why haven't you come back yet? Wait a minute. You all know you want me to wait. What do you eat? Get out of here. A few of the servants fled from the door, almost hitting the person who came. When they looked up, it was as if they had seen the Buddha, and they all shouted, Adjutant Xuan, Amitabha. You are finally back, hurry in. Hurry in. If you don't enter, the commander will shoot people. Adjutant Xuan is back. Chief, people are back. Xuan Huaifeng was almost carried into the room by them. Directly to Bai Xuelan. When Bai Xuelan heard that Xuan Huaifeng was back, he let go of his heart that was hanging in the air. He sat upright on the bed, scrutinized him hard. And when he saw that there was no injury or mark, he was calm. However, my heart is not happy after all. Looking at Xuan Huaifeng, he asked coldly, where have you been? Didn't you ask for leave from Nian's house? Why is Adjutant's son here, and you haven't arrived yet? Xuan Huaifeng originally heard that he was injured, so he was a little concerned. But he didn't expect to be interrogated like a prisoner when he entered the door. What's wrong with your injury? His gaze turned to Bai Xuelan's bandaged right arm. Bai Xuelan didn't know if it was because of anesthesia, his brain was not sober as usual, or because he was in a bad mood. He hummed in his nose and asked, I am injured, you are very happy. Aren't you? Is it my life? Xuan Huaifeng was startled. It's a waste of time to argue with this big bastard. Too lazy to argue with him, he turned around fiercely and walked out of the room. Bai Xuelan probably knew that he had said something negative, and he became bored. For the first time in the world, he didn't stop him and let him go. Xuan Huaifeng went out of Bai Xuelan's bedroom and asked the people outside the door, what the hell is going on? Why isn't the chief guard following him when he goes out? The chief has been out with guards recently, but there are a lot of people in ambush. I heard that there are 7 or 8. There are those with knives and those with pistols. The guards who followed the commander were all pointed out and tried desperately to block them. But 2 died, and the other 2 died. The driver was scared. His face turned blue, but fortunately his life is still alive. The chief was covered in blood when he got out of the car. Which scared us to death. Xuan Huaifeng, seeing that the words were too messy, waved them to stop and asked, the wound was which doctor bandaged it? Has anyone gone? The housekeeper said. The one invited is Vice Pai Shu of Jinghua Hospital, an expert in trauma. He is afraid that the condition of his injury will change, so he doesn't dare to leave for the time being. And waits in the wing next to him. Xuan Huaifeng went to the wing as he said. Sure enough, there was a doctor in a white coat and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses sitting inside. talking in a low voice to another young man who was like an assistant in white. Seeing Xuan Huaifeng coming in, both of them quickly stood up. Xuan Huaifeng first stated his identity and asked the older doctor, who was the vice president, "How is our chief?" Vice President Xu said in a deep voice, "It's not serious, but the gun on the arm is injured, the bullet went out. It's a good thing not to hurt the bone. Just be careful and take care of it. After all, it's a human body, so many things may happen, and the chief's body is a heavy responsibility. So I don't dare to make a complete guarantee." Xuan Huaifeng nodded, "That's for sure. Do you have any other instructions?" "I prescribed the medicine. Please take the medicine on time." With a strange temper, he said with a smile, "The chief is busy, sometimes if you forget to take your medicine, please ask Adjutant Xuan to remind you." "I will." Of course, Adjutant Xuan must be very competent. Also, if the chief is willing to go to the hospital for a re-examination, that's the best thing. If you really can't find time, you can call and ask me to come over. Xuan Huaifeng asked, "How long for the re-examination?" "Once a week. I'm afraid that the chief will find it troublesome. If it's once every 2 weeks, I'm afraid that there will be physical changes in the middle." "I'm sorry for Prime Minister Pai's entrustment." "Prime Minister Pai?" "Yes. Prime Minister Pai asked me personally just now. He said that the chief must recover as soon as possible." "Adjutant Xuan doesn't know that Prime Minister Pai is here?" Xuan Huaifeng knew that Bai Xuelan's cousin, the Prime Minister of the country, had also come to visit. And his adjutant came later than him. His face was hot, and he felt a little ashamed, so he had to say, "Vice President Xu's advice, I will remember it. Just review it once a week. The time on the chief's side will naturally be arranged by me." He thanked Vice President Xu again and again, and mentioned that Bai Xuelan's current situation was not stable, and asked him if he could stay overnight so that he could observe it nearby. Vice President Xu knew that Bai Xuelan had a different identity and agreed immediately. After Xuan Huaifeng asked about the situation, he walked out of the wing room. He met Adjutant Sun head-on. The two adjutants stood in the corridor and chatted privately, and Xuan Huaifeng asked, "Do you know who did it?" Adjutant Sun said, "We caught 2 living victims and locked them in the police station. They should be severely interrogated." I asked who was behind the scenes. "But as far as I can see, most of them are the people who play the smoke." Xuan Huaifeng frowned, "They are so bold?" Adjutant Sun said, "Once the opium drug addiction breaks out, even if you sell your wife, you have to change the money to suck it up. All you have to do is spend your money to buy goods. In this business, you can get several times or 10 times the profit. The courage is soaked in blood." After a while, there was a little bit of wind. Several colleagues from the customs side were beaten with sap on the road. The chief was just to beware of this before he sent more guards. "Otherwise, why do you have to bring so many people with you every time you go out, Adjutant Xuan?" Xuan Huaifeng was stunned. He always thought that the guards were sent to monitor him, but he didn't know there was such a reason. How much did he blame Bai Xuelan in the wrong way? He couldn't help but sighed. Why didn't the chief tell me about these things? Adjutant Sun never dared to interject anything between him and Bai Xuelan, only smiled perfunctorily. The chief's mind, we are subordinates. Sometimes I can't guess. Oh, I have to go to the police station. I'll ask you here first. Xuan Huaifeng and Adjutant Sun separated and walked for a while, only to find that he had walked to the door of Bai Xuelan's bedroom again. He left with anger just now, and now he goes back automatically, a little embarrassed. Moreover, I don't know if Bai Xuelan will take the opportunity to make things difficult. However, it would be unreasonable to just turn around and go back to his room and leave the injured boss behind. After thinking about it, I made up my mind and called the housekeeper. You go and ask the doctor if the wound should be taboo, and then tell the kitchen if you understand. And ask them to make food for the chief. When the housekeeper left, he said to the servant at the door, "You are busy with your own business. When the chief has any orders, I will call you again." Everyone listened to him and dispersed. Xuan Huaifeng took a chair by himself, put it under the crescent-shaped transparent window, took another book, sat down, and listened to the situation of Bai Xuelan inside at any time while reading. The book was picked up on the shelf, and when I sat down to read it, I realized it was gone with the wind. He pursed his lips and smiled wryly. He had heard about this book before, and he borrowed it to read because it was agreed. I hurriedly read most of the book, and felt that it was nothing more than that. The writing was not bad, but it did not meet the aesthetics of men, and it was too hypocritical. It's probably all women who like to watch it. Now I don't want to make a trip to get the book, so I have to open the book in the middle and turn it down. Unexpectedly, after reading it carefully, there is a subtle difference from the previous feeling. Unconsciously, I read it carefully and quietly. The more you look, the more fascinated you are. When I got to the back, I saw how Si Jia fell down the stairs and woke up crying, "I hate him." Barrett heard a burst of pain outside. Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help but resonate and sighed deeply for him. Suddenly someone asked, "Just read the book, why are you sighing?" The voice came from behind without any warning. Xuan Huaifeng was so frightened that all his hair stood on end. He jumped up and turned his head. It turned out to be Bai Xuelan. His right arm was wrapped around his neck with a bandage, and he leaned on the door and looked at him with interest. When Xuan Huaifeng saw that he was silently frightening himself again, he frowned with anger. I wanted to accuse him of something wrong. Seeing the white wound on his arm, it was not easy to fall into the trap. After thinking for a moment, he restrained his temper and asked lightly, "What are you doing here?" "The doctor said that you lost blood and should be lying on your back. Rest in bed. If you want tea, just call out the door." He closed the book, put it on the chair, and walked over to bring Bai Xuelan back to the room. Bai Xuelan was only shot in the arm, but his legs and feet were completely normal. Seeing that Xuan Huaifeng was willing to condescend to help him, he was so happy as if he had eaten an elixir. On the shoulders of Xuan Huaifeng, step by step to the side of the bed. When he went to bed, he hummed again on purpose, pulling the flesh on his face to pretend pain. Xuan Huaifeng was worried that when he helped him to bed, he was clumsy and blocked his right arm, and asked in surprise, "What? Did I touch the wound?" Bai Xuelan shook his head. "Maybe the morphine has dissipated, and slowly it is getting worse and worse. It hurts. I'll ask the doctor to give you a little more morphine." Bai Xuelan still shook his head. "Morphine and opium are similar. If you use too much, you'll be addicted. So don't give it up." Xuan Huaifeng asked, "Then what should we do?" Bai Xuelan snorted again, pretending to be uncomfortable, and said with his tongue in his mouth, "What can I do? I can only bear it." Lie back, resting his head on the soft pillow, and closed his eyes slightly. Seeing his appearance, Xuan Huaifeng seemed to be in severe pain, and he didn't know how to solve it. So it was quite uncomfortable. I thought to myself, people who are usually domineering suddenly fall into this end. I don't know if it is a bad thing and a bad reward. But he was so majestic that he was beaten all of a sudden, and he was even more pitiful than ordinary people. Xuan Huaifeng glanced at Bai Xuelan and felt that he deserved it. Looking at it again, I felt that I was gloating at the misfortune, even worse than Bai Xuelan. Taking another look, I remembered that Bai Xuelan had bullied him so much a while ago, and he did everything possible. Now that he bullied those who would resist, it was inevitable that he would be shot. This is what makes the wicked grind by the wicked. But Taking another look, Xuan Huaifeng felt ashamed. Most of Bai Xuelan was killed by those opium dealers. People who buy and sell opium are the most hateful and bring disaster to the country and the people. No matter how bad Bai Xuelan is, this is still a good job. He didn't hate the opium dealers, but he even stood on the same side as them, hoping that Bai Xuelan would be unlucky. If my father was still alive and knew that he was right and wrong, he might have drawn a gun and killed this son. Bai Xuelan moaned with his eyes closed on the bed. He secretly opened a slit and saw Xuan Huaifeng standing in front of the bed and did not leave. His handsome face was obviously hesitant, and my heart was sweet and happy. If I had known this earlier, I would rather take 2 more shots and get more serious injuries. He took a few breaths, opened his eyes, and said in a sullen voice, "I'm uncomfortable lying down. You should help me get up and sit down." Xuan Huaifeng persuaded, "What are you doing up? Isn't it just as uncomfortable?" But he still sits up carefully, folds 2 pillows behind his waist, and puts his back against the head of the bed. Bai Xuelan was afraid of him leaving in every possible way, so he deliberately said, "I'm so sorry, today you are going to see Mrs. Nian. And I called you back again for me. In fact, my injury is not in the way. If you want to see Mrs. Nian, it's better to go. Don't delay for me here." He added, "You can call a servant. I'm just so upset that I'm just in pain. Just let me listen to someone with me." Xuan Huaifeng was very serious about what he said. After thinking about it, he said, "Okay. Then you wait." He turned around and walked out. Bai Xuelan's eyes widened. He originally thought that Xuan Huaifeng was soft-hearted, and seeing that he was hurt and suffering, he would never leave him alone. Unexpectedly, the hard-to-play loses its head and ends up stealing chickens without losing rice. Regret makes my intestines green. Watching Xuan Huaifeng walk out of the door and go to find servants, he was so anxious that his internal organs were smoking, but he didn't dare to jump out of bed and chase after him. As soon as you chase it out, isn't the trick just now exposed? Xuan Huaifeng had to hate him to death. Bai Xuelan almost gritted his teeth, and slammed his fist on the bed. His body moved, causing the wound to ache suddenly. The pain in his body and the pain in his heart really hurt one after another. He was so annoyed that he covered his right arm with one hand, and half of his forehead was pressed against the wall, rubbing it back and forth. The handsome face twisted into a bit of anger. Just as there was no cure, suddenly footsteps sounded, quite familiar. Bai Xuelan turned his head suddenly and saw a figure flashing by the window, and after a while, Xuan Huaifeng appeared from the door, holding a book in his hand. Seeing Bai Xuelan's eyes shining brightly, looking straight at himself with an unusual expression, he couldn't help asking, "Is it hurting badly again? Otherwise, I'd better ask the doctor to come and take a look." Bai Xuelan was afraid that he would turn around and run away again. When he got closer, he stretched out his uninjured left arm and grabbed him tightly, and asked him, "Where did you go just now? When it hurts, you can get better by diverting your attention." "So, I went to get this." Xuan Huaifeng showed him the book he brought from the room. It turned out to be the old French book that Bai Xuelan used. Xuan Huaifeng said, "I don't understand a few things. And it's hard to learn the correct pronunciation. Since you want someone to relieve the boredom, you can teach me. It's better than sitting and thinking about your wounds." It was empty. And now a big piece of pie fell from the sky for no reason. It made him overjoyed and said with a smile, "Okay. It couldn't be better." He laughed so happily, Xuan Huaifeng glanced at him warily. Bai Xuelan hurriedly coughed again, pretending to be in pain, and frowned for a while covering the wound. Xuan Huaifeng said worriedly, "Aren't you all lying to me?" Bai Xuelan said sternly, "Why did I lie to you? Make a transparent hole in your arm, is there such a lie?" Or you don't believe it? I was shot. So I'll just untie the bandage for you to see. Then he was about to untie the bandage. How could Xuan Huaifeng let him make such a fool of himself? He stopped him immediately. And after some serious persuasion, he brought a chair over and placed it by the side of his bed, sat down and opened the French book. He took out a few pages of notes that he had written before, and pointed to the places he didn't understand, and asked them one by one. It is rare for Bai Xuelan to be so docile and close to Xuan Huaifeng. He can't wait to dig his heart out. When Xuan Huaifeng asks anything, he will say it carefully. His gentle tone, patient attitude, and detailed analysis are beyond the reach of formal French teachers. Goodbye. It's au revoir. Xuan Huaifeng speaks excellent English, but is just getting started in French, so he recites it a little jerkily. Bonne nuit, it's good night. Then thank you? What should I do? 2 short words were written on it and he turned to look at Bai Xuelan. Bai Xuelan asked him to write a pen. Seeing that he was about to move, Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help but say, "Don't be busy, your hand is hurt again. Don't be afraid, I can also write with my left hand." He glanced at Xuan Huaifeng. "If you don't believe me, I will write to look. I just want you to help me carry the paper." Xuan Huaifeng handed him the white paper with a few lines written on it, and let him write as he sat on the bed. Bai Xuelan really used his left hand to write a few words and said with a smile, "This is thank you, merci. I like this pronunciation very much, you can read it with me." He first read it lightly. Xuan Huaifeng read along. Merci. After reading, he realized that he had been deceived by Bai Xuelan again, raised his eyes and glanced at Bai Xuelan. However, they worked so hard to become a free French teacher, so it was right to say a word of thanks, and it was not good to be rude. Bai Xuelan looked at his gentle face, and his chest warmed silently. It was as if it had been baked on the stove for more than 2 hours in winter, and slowly, the inside and outside became anxious. Looking at Xuan Huaifeng's handsome and seductive face, who was concentrating thinking, his heart was beating wildly. Xuan Huaifeng was about to walk away from the bed with a pen and paper, so he couldn't help holding his wrist and whispered, "Why are you sitting so far away? Are you afraid that you will get sick from me?" Pulling Xuan Huaifeng towards the lap belt. Xuan Huaifeng was afraid of hitting his wound for a while, so he didn't dare to struggle. He was dragged to the bed after hesitation. He shouted and asked, "What are you doing?" Bai Xuelan hung one hand on the bandage. He pressed him down lightly and smiled, "Guess what I'm going to do?" "Tisk. It's strange, you only went out for a day. Why do I think you've been gone for a few years? I heard people say, this is the sun does not see each other, like every 3 autumns." His lips touched Xuan Huaifeng's white neck, and they kissed like fire. Xuan Huaifeng could not have imagined that he was still mortal after being wounded by a gunshot, so daring to act like this. He became anxious and pushed Bai Xuelan over with a violent force with both hands. Immediately rolled off the bed, he stood up and said angrily, "I know you can't be trusted." Bai Xuelan was overthrown by him, and he immediately knew that something was wrong. He was thinking about finding words to explain. But Xuan Huaifeng's words just hit a point that he was very concerned about. He rolled over and sat up, and asked with a cold face, "A person like me? What's wrong with a person like me? Can't compare to a noble commander like you? Or can't I compare to that arrogant young master Lin Qijun?" Xuan Huaifeng became anxious when he learned that he was in an ambush. But he didn't have time to pay attention to what happened in the morning. Now listening to Bai Xuelan mentioning Lin Qijun, I don't know why, the pain is dull and painful. And it is extremely annoying. I thought to myself, Qijun and he seem to have changed their taste now, and they all blamed Bai Xuelan, who was killed in the middle. He must have lost his mind and was crazy, and he was still worried about the ambush and injury to him. The more I thought about it, the more I felt that the injured person in front of me was abominable and hateful. You rely on the family all day long to be a blessing. What kind of skill is it? A person like you, when you have a backer, is a bully, and without a backer, you are still cheated. What's so great? Bai Xuelan was furious and desperate, staring at Xuan Huaifeng for a moment. He gritted his teeth and said with a smile, "Okay, you scold me well. Do you think that without me, you can live happily with Lin Qijun? Just wait. Wait for that day. I'm gone, and my heart is dead. Let's see how they abuse you." That's right, the most hateful people in the world are people like me. Without the oppression of people like me, other sufferings are nothing. It's a big deal. Like Bai Xuelan. If you want to laugh, you have to laugh. If you want to cry, you have to cry. If you want to sing, you have to sing. And if you want to lie down, you lie down obediently. The gold watch on his wrist, you ask him how many nights did he stay with Lin Qijun. Xuan Huaifeng couldn't listen anymore, and stomped his feet. You are despicable and shameless. Spit out blood. Angrily, he walked out the door. Bai Xuelan was still behind him and laughed angrily. I'm spraying people with blood? Who is the rich young master who doesn't play with a few people outside? Do you think Lin Qijun is willing to wait empty-handed for you? Ha! You look too high. He is. He has a lot of banknotes. And the actors outside are more than Bai Xuelan, Xu Fuchai, who sang Lao Dan in the Wing Shang group, and Yu Jingying, who just debuted. If you ask him, they are all acquaintances. Before he landed, Xuan Huaifeng had already rushed out, staggering toward the servants. Bai Xuelan watched his back disappear into the transparent and quiet room, and his anger suddenly cooled down, turning into a pool of ashes like ice slag. Sitting on the bed, my mind was lost. I don't know how long he was stunned before he called a servant to ask the driver who drove to Xuan Huaifeng's house, Nian's house, to come in and question him. As soon as the driver came, Bai Xuelan asked, "Adjutant Xuan went out today. Where did he go? Who did he meet? Why didn't he arrive at Nian's house after noon?" The driver said, "The car was blocked on Ping'an Avenue." Adjutant Xuan got out of the car. Originally, he said that he wanted to buy cakes for Mrs. Nian. Later, he met a young girl named Lahua. Later, he met the young master of the Lin family. The young master of the Lin family said that he would invite Adjutant Xuan to dinner, and they arrived. Huasha Hotel had a meal of Western food. Bai Xuelan listened to the word Lin as if a bloody knife was carved into his heart. The wound on his right arm also throbbed violently. The pain was so unreasonable that Bai Xuelan even thought that if he pulled off the bandage and took out the wound, it might be the word Lin in the blood. Otherwise, it's just a word, Xuan. He sent someone to call Adjutant Sun in and said, "The guards who followed Huaifeng today are very outrageous. It means that they want to stay at Nian's house, but they let him walk around. What should I do if something goes wrong? Go spread the word, these guards 30 lashes per person, so that they can have a better memory." Adjutant Sun and the driver, as well as the servant in the room, were sent out. After sitting for about 10 minutes, he became more and more irritable. "The wound is getting more and more painful. Housekeeper." Bai Xuelan simply got up from the bed and roared outside the door with a dark face, "Where are all the dead people? Bring wine. I want vodka."